Senator, overall, how would you assess the job that Betsy DeVos has done since she was confirmed as Education Secretary?
I've been very disappointed, but not surprised. I think that she really is an ideologue when it comes to our public schools, and I think when she talks about education in this country, she does not project support really for public education, which I think is important for the secretary to do. I mean, just the other day, the Denver Public Schools was recognized by a group in Washington for being the #1 choice school in America. And she went to that ceremony and took the opportunity to denigrate the work in Denver Public Schools without ever having been here. So that doesn't instill me with a great deal of confidence.
Anything in particular, anything else that's been disappointing to you?
No, I read the other day, for instance, that she said when asked about the results that had occurred in the Michigan schools and the Detroit schools, her answer to that was that she wasn't a numbers person and that was just for choice. And choice is not choice for choice sake. Choice is about improving outcomes for kids, and you cannot do that without real accountability that ensures that there's rigor or that we're moving toward rigor for kids that are choosing schools in the system. I wish you would come to Denver and take a look at the work that's been done here, both in terms of choice and also in terms of trying to move our traditional schools forward.
Where would you bring her? What schools would you like to show her?
Well, I think I'd rely on my superintendent to tell me where I should go.
Got it. So you spent months trying to craft a bipartisan compromise on ESSA, the new federal education law. Then the country elected a president who has pledged to eliminate the Act's accountability standards. What advice would you give to state officials and school districts about how to comply or not comply with ESSA's mandates?
But my advice is that we should have what we should avoid is a race to the bottom here. I mean, there was a change between No Child Left Behind and and ESSA, and part of that change was letting go of some accountability from the federal government and placing the responsibility on the states. I'm disappointed by what the signals the administration is sending. My advice would be to anybody who's in the business of implementing this is to make sure their state is a state that leads all other states in terms of the rigor and expectations that we have for our kids. And states can do that. There's no magic that says the federal government has to do it. But what I would like to see is states competing with each other to provide that rigor rather than having a race to the bottom, which I think some people worry might be the result of the changes that have been made.
On the same subject, the State Board of Education yesterday signed off on Colorado's state education plan under ESSA to forward it to Washington. One of the board members, Republican Steve Durham, had this to say, quote, "Unless you're poor or a minority or from another identity politics group, there is nothing in this plan that will benefit you. There's nothing in this plan to improve the education of your children." What do you think about his characterization and choice of words?
Well, I haven't read the plan, so I can't speak directly to the plan. I can speak to the process that developed the plan, which, as far as I can tell, was very far-reaching across all of Colorado, and it included constituencies both in urban areas and in rural areas, and I think a lot of educators and parents and others were involved. So I will withhold judgment on the final product, but I think the process to me struck me as a robust process. I don't think that's helpful rhetoric. I think that what we should be doing is making sure that all kids in this state have a chance to have a great education no matter what circumstances they're born into. We're a long way from that being true, but language that divides us is not helpful in trying to achieve that objective.
Lots of things in play in Colorado this year, including some local school board elections. Earlier this spring, the Colorado Education Association, in opposing a bill in Colorado that would boost charter school funding, branded it as, quote, a Betsy DeVos-style privatization bill. We're likely to see efforts in school board races, including here in Denver, where the incumbents all favor reforms that you began and Tom Boasberg continued. What do you think of that kind of message and tactic?
I do think that's one of the real, one of the very regrettable aspects of President Trump choosing Betsy DeVos to be the Secretary of Education. Because if she becomes the face of reform in this country, if she becomes the face of change in this country, or becomes an excuse for not changing and not reforming our schools or our school districts, that would be a real shame. And I know what the content of the reforms are in the Denver Public Schools, and I know where our starting point was, and I know where we are today. And I am the first to say we have a long, long way to go. We are certainly not perfect. We've certainly made mistakes, but we've created a lot of opportunity for a lot of people. And I, for one, am not going to have that work thrown under the wheels of the bus of an ideologue in Washington that I think doesn't reflect in any way the work that's been done in Denver over now many years.
Okay, finally, you take a bipartisan approach to your role in the Senate. What opportunities do you see, if any, to find bipartisan common ground on education issues?
I think, broadly speaking, I've even though I've spent a lot of my first term working with others in the other party, this is a moment where bipartisanship looks very hard to find. And the place, I think, with respect to education where we're going to find it, and I'm optimistic about it, is higher education and the reauthorization of the higher ed bill. I've already had conversations with Lamar Alexander, who's the Republican chairman of the Education Committee. He's from Tennessee. He and I work very closely together on ESSA, and I've been spending a lot of time thinking about access questions for higher ed, how to make higher ed more accessible, less expensive. We heard some of those questions today, not surprisingly at all, from students at Bruce Randolph. So I look forward to rolling up my sleeves with Chairman Alexander and seeing what we can do as a bipartisan way to create a higher ed bill that's more responsive to the needs of kids that are living in the 21st century rather than the 20th or 19th century.
Well, thank you, Senator. Anything you'd like to add?
No, thanks for having me. I can't tell you how happy I am to be back in the Denver Public Schools. I mentioned earlier today that the wonderful thing about this job is that I get to visit schools all over the state, and this week I was in a high school in Meeker and now in Bruce Randolph, and it continues to be, on some level, the best part of what I do.